You ever have a relative look you dead in the eyes at a family dinner and say, "Honey, don't aim too high. You'll only disappoint yourself"? Well, my Aunt Carol didn't just say it. She built her whole life around making sure I believed it. And then one Saturday afternoon in October, a man in a brown suit handed her a glass of juice, and her world flipped upside down. This is what happened when my aunt said I'd never marry well, and then found out who my fiancé's father really was. Before I take you there, I need you to do me a favor. Hit that like button if you've ever had a family member count you out before you even got started. And share this with someone who needs to hear that patience isn't weakness, it's just timing. Now, pull up a chair. This one takes a while to settle, like good stew on a low fire. Let me introduce you to my Aunt Carol. She was my father's older sister, which meant she believed age gave her the right to comment on everything: my grades, my clothes, my job, my future. She lived in a brick house on Maple Drive with porcelain angels on the mantel and a lawn so green it looked fake. Her husband, Uncle Bob, sold insurance. Her daughter, my cousin Linda, married a dentist. In Aunt Carol's world, that was the peak of success. Me? I was the niece who didn't fit. I worked at a small bookstore called the Reading Nook on 3rd Street. Made $14 an hour. Drove a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the passenger door. Lived in a studio apartment above a bakery, which smelled like cinnamon every morning. I liked my life. But Aunt Carol looked at me like I was a half-finished sweater she wanted to unravel. Every Thanksgiving, same routine. We'd sit around the long oak table in her dining room, and she'd go around asking about everyone's raises, promotions, new cars. Then she'd get to me. "Still at the bookstore, sweetheart?" she'd say, tilting her head like a disappointed But the thing is, I didn't know either. 3 months later, a man walked into the bookstore. His name was David. He was tall, quiet, wore worn-out boots and a flannel jacket with a missing button on the left sleeve. He asked for a book on local hiking trails. I showed him the section. He thanked me, bought the book, and left. Then he came back the next week. And the week after that. Turns out, David was a carpenter. Built furniture by hand. No social media. No fancy car. He lived in a small rented house on the edge of town with a vegetable garden he'd planted himself. He brought me tomatoes once, in a paper bag, and said, "These aren't pretty, but they taste like summer." That was the moment I knew. We dated quietly. Walks in the park. Juice at the corner diner. He never raised his voice. Never bragged. When I told him about my aunt, he listened. Then he said, "People who talk down to others are usually trying to climb up themselves." I invited him to a family barbecue at my parents' house. Aunt Carol was there, of course. She looked David up and down, the flannel, the boots, the calloused hands, and her smile never reached her eyes. "So," she said, loud enough for the whole patio to hear, "what do you do for a living, David?" "I build things, ma'am," he said. "Tables. Chairs. Sometimes cabinets." "Oh," she said. "A handyman." "Carpenter," he said quietly. She turned to me. "Well, he seems nice." That night, after everyone left, my mother said, "Don't let her get to you." My father said, "He's a good man. That's all that matters." But Aunt Carol wasn't done. 2 days later, she called me. "I'm just looking out for you," she said. "A carpenter? You'll be struggling your whole life. And a wedding? Where would you even have it? The VFW hall? The church basement? People will talk." I said, "We haven't even talked about marriage yet." She laughed. "Honey, I'm trying to save you from embarrassment. When the time comes, just keep it small. Don't aim for something you can't afford." I hung up. And for the first time, I felt something other than hurt. I felt a cold, Quiet anger settled into my bones like a nail driven deep. David proposed 6 months later. No grand gestures. No skywriting. He took me to the garden behind his rented house, where the tomatoes had grown back, and handed me a simple silver ring he'd made himself from reclaimed wood and metal. "I can't give you a mansion," he said. I told her we were looking at a few places. Nothing fancy. Maybe the community center. She shook her head. "No, no, no. You can't do that. The family has standards. If you're going to get married, you need a proper hall. But," she paused, touching her pearl necklace, "I don't think you can afford any of the good ones." I said we'd manage. She leaned in. "Look. I'll help you find a place. But you have to promise me, no embarrassing the family. No cheap decorations. No potluck dinner. If you can't do it right, don't do it at all." David, standing behind me, said nothing. But his hand found mine. Over the next 2 weeks, Aunt Carol sent me a list of venues. All of them were expensive. All of them were out of our budget. And every time I suggested something more modest, she'd say, "That's exactly what I was afraid of. You're settling. Just like you always do." Then, one evening, David came over with a folded piece of paper. "There's a place on Vine Street," he said. "The old red brick building. It's called the Heritage Hall. I've done some repair work there. The owner is a quiet man. Keeps to himself. But the hall is beautiful, hardwood floors, high ceilings, a garden in the back." I looked it up online. No website. Just a phone number. I called the next morning. A man with a deep, calm voice answered. "Yes," he said. "The hall is available on your date. And don't worry about the cost. David has done good work for me. Consider it a gift." I asked his name. "George," he said. "Just George." I told Aunt Carol we'd found a venue. She demanded the name. I told her. She'd never heard of it. "Probably a rundown old barn," she said. "But fine. It's your wedding. Just don't expect me to pretend it's nice." The morning of the wedding, it rained. Not hard, a soft, steady rain that made the streets shine like new leather. I got dressed in my mother's childhood bedroom, in a simple cream dress I'd found at a second-hand shop. My mother pinned a small blue ribbon inside the hem. "For luck," she said. David and I had decided to keep the guest list small. 40 people. Family, a few friends, and George, the venue owner, who'd offered to help set up the chairs. Aunt Carol, he was older, maybe 70, with silver hair and a dark brown suit. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane. And he went straight to the head table, where David was cutting a slice of cake for me. "David," the man said, his voice warm and low. "You didn't tell me it was today." David wiped his hands on a napkin and stood up. "George. I didn't want to bother you." George laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. "Bother me? Son, this is my hall. And you're like family to me." Aunt Carol stopped mid-bite. George turned to the guests and raised his hand. "If I may interrupt for just a moment. My name is George Harrington. I own this building. And I've known David for 7 years. He's repaired every broken chair, every warped table, every loose step in this place. Never asked for more than a fair wage. Never complained. And when he called to ask if he could hold his wedding here, I told him no." Silence. Then George smiled. "I told him no because I wouldn't charge him. A man like this, he doesn't pay for a hall. He builds the hall." He turned to me. "Young lady, you've married a good man. And I don't say that lightly. I've built half the buildings in this county. I know character when I see it." Someone whispered, "Harrington. As in Harrington Construction. The one that donated the new library?" Another voice, "His family owns half of Vine Street." Aunt Carol's face went pale. She looked at David. The flannel was gone, replaced by a simple gray suit, but his hands were still calloused. His boots were still old. He hadn't changed. He had never needed to. George raised his glass of juice. To David and Sarah. May they build a life as solid as the furniture he makes. Everyone drank. Everyone applauded. And Aunt Carol quietly set down her fork, stood up, and walked out the side door without a word. Her car was gone before the cake was finished. That night, after the guests left and the rain had stopped, David and I sat in the garden behind the hall. The air smelled like wet soil and roses. He held my hand. I rested my head on his shoulder. And I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I'd won. But I didn't. Because my phone buzzed around 10 p.m. a text from Aunt Carol. It said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong about you. And I was wrong about him. I've spent so long being afraid that our family would look small that I made myself small instead. You don't have to forgive me. But I had to say it." I read it 3 times. Then I put the phone down. He waited. "She's going to go home to that big house on Maple Drive," I said, "and she's going to sit in her living room with those porcelain angels, and she's going to feel humiliated. Not because I did anything to her. But because the truth did. And the truth is, she spent 20 years telling me I wasn't enough, because someone probably told her the same thing." David squeezed my hand. "Revenge doesn't taste like cake," he said. "It tastes like cold juice you didn't ask for." I nodded. The next morning, I called Aunt Carol. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was raw. "I'm not calling to gloat," I said. "I'm calling to tell you that David and I are having dinner at my parents' house next Sunday. There will be extra chairs. You're welcome to come." Silence. "Then, why would you want me there?" "Because," I said, "someone once told me that families aren't buildings. You can't just tear down what you don't like and start over. You have to repair. And repair takes time." She didn't come that Sunday. But she came the Sunday after. She brought a pie. It was store-bought. But she brought it. And that, right there, that small, awkward, imperfect step, was better than any victory I could have planned. Here's what I learned. You can spend years planning the perfect moment to prove someone wrong. You can wait for the truth to rise up like bread dough and watch their face fall. And for a minute, it feels good. But then the minute passes. And you're left with the same kitchen, the same table, the same family. The question isn't whether you can win. The question is, what do you want the room to look like after the dust settles? I wanted revenge. But what I needed was peace. And peace doesn't come from watching someone leave early. It comes from leaving the door open. Even when they don't deserve it. Especially then.